You've looked at a map of Scotland before, Highlands in the north, Glasgow and Edinburgh in the south, hundreds of islands scattered around the coast. It looks complete. It isn't. The Scotland you see on a normal map is only part of the territory that has made this country so important. Beyond the coastline is an area of sea roughly 6 times larger than Scotland itself. For most of history, that barely mattered. Then people discovered what was underneath it. Oil and gas beneath the North Sea helped create one of the most important energy regions in Europe. And now, just as those fields are getting older, the same waters are becoming useful for something completely different. The strange part is that this has happened before. Scotland keeps finding new uses for places that once looked ordinary, remote, or even useless. So why does the same small country keep ending up with geography the world suddenly needs? The answer begins nowhere near the North Sea. It begins underneath the part of Scotland where most people live. The first place to look is the Central Belt. On a map, it is the narrow strip running between Glasgow and Edinburgh. Today, it contains most of Scotland's largest towns and cities. But long before the motorways, suburbs, and industrial estates appeared, something else was already there. Coal, ironstone, limestone, fireclay. 4 different materials in one place at almost exactly the moment the world learned how to use them all together. Coal provided heat. Ironstone could be turned into iron. Limestone was needed in the furnaces. Fireclay could survive extreme temperatures. Then look at what was around them. Glasgow sat on the Clyde. Edinburgh had the Forth. Canals connected the 2 sides of the country, and railways eventually spread across the region. Heavy materials could move from mines to furnaces, then from factories to ports. Mines opened across Lanarkshire, Ayrshire, Fife, and the Lothians. Ironworks followed. Shipyards lined the Clyde. Glasgow grew into one of the great industrial cities of the 19th century, building ships, locomotives, and machinery that traveled around the world. And that sounds like the answer. Scotland had the right materials, close together, at exactly the right time. But there's a problem. Travel north and almost everything that made the Central Belt useful disappears. The coal fields end, the factories thin out, the land becomes colder, higher, and emptier. By this explanation, northern Scotland should be the least useful part of the country. It wasn't. In fact, the very things that seemed to make the Highlands difficult would eventually become their advantage. The first clue was water and height. Together, they stored energy. Water fell across the high ground, gathered in lochs and rivers, then dropped towards lower land and the sea. Put a dam in the right valley, send that water through a turbine, and suddenly Scotland's mountains were doing something its coalfields never could. The Highlands had something completely different. They had water, height. That combination stored energy. Water fell across the high ground, gathered in lochs and rivers, then dropped towards lower land and the sea. Put a dam in the right valley, send that water through a turbine, and the same mountains that made the Highlands difficult to cross could suddenly produce electricity. During the 20th century, huge hydroelectric schemes spread through the Highlands. Dams blocked valleys, tunnels carried water through mountains, lochs became reservoirs. Power stations appeared in places that had never contained coalfields or giant factories. The landscape that had once looked like an obstacle had become the resource, and it still is. The hydroelectric power generated about 4.6 terawatt-hours of electricity in Scotland. But the important part is what happened to our explanation. Central Scotland mattered because of what was underneath it. The Highlands mattered because of what moved across them. Coal in one place, falling water in another, completely different resources. The same country. Then Scotland found something much bigger. And it was not on the land at all. Go east from Aberdeen and eventually Scotland disappears behind you. For most of history, the North Sea was simply the cold stretch of water between Britain and Northern Europe. Fishermen crossed it, merchants crossed it, navies fought over it. The really valuable part was thousands of meters below. Oil and gas. Exploration expanded rapidly during the 20th century. Huge fields were discovered beneath the seabed. Platforms appeared beyond the horizon. Pipelines crossed the seafloor. Helicopters began carrying workers offshore. Aberdeen changed with them, becoming one of Europe's great oil and gas centers. And suddenly the normal map of Scotland became misleading. Scotland's land covers around 80,000 square kilometers, but the sea area associated with Scotland, out to the limits of the exclusive economic zone, covers about 462,000 square kilometers, roughly 6 times as much. The country had not physically become larger. People had simply discovered that the coastline was not the end of its useful geography. Oil and gas turned that hidden territory into an enormous industry. Offshore fields spread across the North Sea and later west of Shetland. Aberdeen filled with engineers, supply companies, and workers servicing platforms far beyond the coast. Scotland had gone from coal beneath its cities, to water falling through its mountains, to oil and gas buried beneath the sea many people had barely thought of as territory at all. By now the pattern seems obvious. Scotland simply got lucky with energy. Coal beneath the Central Belt, water falling through the Highlands, oil and gas beneath the sea. Put enough energy inside one small country, and eventually someone will find a way to use it. But if energy alone explains Scotland, Scotland would not be unusual. Norway shares the North Sea. Russia has vastly more oil, gas, and coal. Iceland has extraordinary geothermal resources. Canada has enormous rivers and fossil fuel reserves. Plenty of countries have mountains, water, wind, or useful rock. Having the resource is only the beginning. Reach it, move it, finance it, connect it to people who need it. Scotland happened to have many of those pieces close together. Its coal fields sat beside growing cities, workers, and ports. Highland Hydro could connect to an electricity grid. North Sea oil appeared beside a country with the money, engineering skill, and industrial infrastructure needed to drill kilometers beneath the seabed. Aberdeen became important, not because oil was physically beneath Aberdeen, but because an entire industry could be built there to reach what was far out at sea. And the contrast shows up on the map. The Central Belt contains most of Scotland's population. The Highlands cover an enormous part of the country, but remain sparsely populated. Mountains, rivers, and exposed coasts can offer huge natural advantages without automatically creating cities or prosperity. Geography gives you an opportunity. What happens around it decides how much that opportunity is worth. Then the value of Scotland's geography changed again. For centuries, one of the most obvious things about Scotland was mostly treated as an inconvenience: the weather. Atlantic storms hit the west. Strong winds crossed the Highlands, Islands, and North Sea. In an economy built around coal and oil that did not look like a major natural resource, it was simply weather. Then humans built machines that could turn moving air into electricity. Suddenly, some of Scotland's most exposed places became some of its most useful. Turbines spread across hills and moors. Offshore wind farms moved into the same seas that had already become famous for oil and gas. In 2025, Scotland generated a record 38.5 terawatt-hours of renewable electricity. Wind produced about 30.8 terawatt-hours of it. Scotland exported far more electricity than it imported. The weather had become an export. Think about what happened. Coal made the Central Belt useful. Falling water did the same for the Highlands. Oil and gas transformed the seabed. Now moving air is giving the land and sea another use. None of those resources is the same thing. Yet all of them depend on the same small country being in exactly the right place. And the North Sea is about to make that pattern even stranger. The oil and gas basin is getting older. Production is declining as fields mature. Normally, that should mean the region becomes less useful. A field produces oil. The oil runs out. The story ends. Except the North Sea does not become empty when the oil is gone. The wells remain, pipelines remain, ports remain. Decades of surveys have mapped what lies beneath the seabed. Engineers know how to drill into it, and some of the same underground formations that held oil and gas can potentially be used for something completely different. Carbon dioxide captured from industry can be transported offshore and injected deep underground. One of Scotland's largest proposed projects, Acorn, plans to use infrastructure around St. Fergus to move captured carbon into storage beneath the North Sea. Work is also examining whether existing pipelines can be reused rather than building everything again. That creates a remarkable reversal. The North Sea became useful because Scotland could bring carbon-rich fuel out of the ground. Parts of the same seabed may now become useful because carbon dioxide can be put back underneath it. Infrastructure built for one industry may help support another. The oil can run out while the geography keeps paying. And this is happening onshore too. Scotland's deep coal mines are mostly gone, but the holes miners dug are still there. Many abandoned workings have filled with water. Deep underground, that water absorbs heat from the surrounding rocks. In former mining areas, that creates the possibility of using old mine water to help warm buildings. A coal mine can have another use after the coal is gone. A depleted oil field can have another use after the oil is gone. A windy stretch of sea can produce energy without anything being removed from it at all. The resource changes, the geography stays, but that still leaves the biggest question. Why does one small country contain so many different kinds of useful geography in the first place? Why are the coal fields in the middle, huge mountains and lochs in the north, oil and gas offshore, and powerful winds wrapped around all of it? The answer begins with a Scotland that would be almost impossible to recognize. Hundreds of millions of years ago, Scotland and England were on opposite sides of an ocean. Much of the rock that became Scotland belonged to an ancient continent that also included parts of what are now North America and Greenland. England and Wales lay on another landmass farther south. Between them was the Iapetus Ocean. Then the ocean began to close. The two sides moved towards each other over millions of years. The sea between them narrowed. Eventually, they collided. Rocks were squeezed, folded, and pushed upwards. Mountains formed. The basic pieces of Britain were being assembled long before Britain existed, and Scotland kept changing after that. At different times, parts of it were covered by tropical forests and swamps. Dead plants accumulated, were buried, and eventually became the coal later mined across the central belt. Volcanoes erupted, mountains rose and wore away. Much later, enormous ice sheets covered the country. Glaciers cut through the older landscape, carving deep valleys and helping create the glens and lochs that now define the highlands. Offshore, a completely different story was unfolding. Deep basins beneath what became the North Sea collected the ingredients that eventually formed oil and gas. Scotland's position beside the Atlantic and North Sea also left its land, islands and waters exposed to powerful winds. Different periods, different forces, different resources. Then all of them ended up packed around one relatively small country. That is the part the normal map cannot show. Scotland did not receive one giant resource jackpot. It inherited the remains of completely different worlds. Ancient swamps left coal, mountains and glaciers left height, valleys and water. Offshore basins left oil and gas. Its exposed position left wind moving across huge areas of land and sea. And once those pieces existed, Scotland had another advantage. They were close enough to connect. Coal fields sat beside Glasgow, the Clyde and the Forth. Highland rivers could feed electricity south. Offshore oil could support an industry centered around Aberdeen. Wind generated on remote hills and at sea could connect back into the same grid. Scotland did not have the largest supply of every resource. It had very different resources close enough to people, ports, and infrastructure to matter. Which brings us back to where this story began. Look at the map of Scotland again. Highlands in the north, Glasgow and Edinburgh in the south, islands scattered around the coast, then the coastline, where Scotland appears to stop. But now that map looks different. It does not show the coal beneath the central belt, the energy stored in the highland landscape, the oil and gas beneath the North Sea, or the wind moving across an area of sea roughly 6 times larger than Scotland itself. The map shows one small country. The resources tell a much bigger story. Scotland never had the largest supply of everything. It didn't need to. Coal mattered when the world needed coal. Highland water mattered when electricity could be made from it. North Sea oil mattered when Europe needed energy. Now wind, depleted reservoirs, and even abandoned mines are giving some of the same places new uses. The people who first dug coal beneath Lanarkshire were not thinking about mine water heat. The engineers who built North Sea pipelines were not building them to carry captured carbon dioxide. And generations of Scots living beside the North Atlantic were not looking at the wind and seeing an electricity export. The geography was already there. The world just kept finding new reasons to want it. Which brings us to the real question. Britain is hiding far more than the map suggests. And if you want more stories about the hidden geography that shaped Britain, subscribe.